Shown here are the results of the experiment between hydrochloric acid and marble chips. The aim of the experiment was to investigate how the particle size of the marble chips was related to the rate of the chemical reaction. The hypothesis would be that smaller chips with a higher surface area should react the fastest. If we look at this results table, there are several things to notice. First of all, it's been drawn using a pencil. There will always be a mistake somewhere in an experiment. Okay, things might not always go to plan, and so it's always good to use a pencil. I've used a ruler. That makes sure that my results are nice and neat. Okay, and it's a clear record of what I've done. I have titles at the top of the table that clearly show what the numbers mean. Next to each title, I have the units, so that I'll never forget what my numbers were measured in. Notice that I've been careful with the number of decimal places. The balance in the video associated with this video, the balance measures to 2 decimal places, and so I've been careful to use 2 decimal places throughout, including, notice, 0.00 at the top. That's commonly forgotten. In the video, you were asked to record the mass lost at 30 seconds, and then every 15 seconds thereafter, up to 4 minutes. And 4 minutes corresponds to 240 seconds. So if I show you the bottom of the table, it goes all the way down to 240 seconds. And I have one column for large chips, one for medium chips, and one for small chips. As you will have seen from the associated video, there were 3 separate experiments, and that is why I have 3 columns there. Notice that I've measured the time in seconds rather than minutes and seconds. This makes drawing the graph easier. In this second part of the video, I'm going to show you how to take my written results table and produce a chart using Microsoft Excel. Right, so I'm going to start with time. So I'm just going to type in time into this cell, which is called A1. And I've got the units there, seconds. Okay, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to write mass loss in grams. So this is exactly the same table that I had handwritten in the first part of the video. Okay, so I've got large chips, then I've got medium chips, and then I've got small chips. Okay, so there are a few things here that I want to fix. The first thing to notice is that the widths of the columns don't quite work. So medium chips doesn't seem to quite fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight those first 4 columns. I'm going to find a division between any 2 of the columns. So it could be these 2. I'm going to choose these 2 here. And I'm going to double click. And you see when I do that, all of the columns magically go to the correct width. Okay. Mass loss actually refers to all 3 of these columns. So what I really want to do is merge these 3 cells. And the way you do that is by going up to the top, finding this button that says merge and center, and click it once. And that merges those 3 cells that I had highlighted. To make it nice and neat, I'm going to highlight all 3 of those columns. I'm now going to center all of the titles. So they now sit in the center of each cell. Okay. I'd like these two cells, A1 and A2, to be merged into one cell. So again, highlight the two cells, click Merge in Center, and that merges them into one big cell. Okay. And now the titles that I have here mirror the titles that I had on the original handwritten sheet that you can rewind and see at the start of this video. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to enter the data into the spreadsheet. So very straightforward. I'm just going through my handwritten table and entering the data. So when you're entering data like this, particularly for example, when you have time in seconds, you could just enter all of the numbers one by one, and that's absolutely fine. If that's the way you're comfortable doing it, that's fine. But quite often with Excel, there's a smart way. So we had 0, we had 30, but after that, every value was 15 seconds more than the previous one. So what we can actually do here is we can go up here, we can press equals, and we can say, okay, well, that cell A5, that's just the same as A4 plus 15. Okay, so instead of us actually having to type 45, we can actually get the Excel spreadsheet to work it out for us. And the beauty of doing that is that I can just highlight that cell, find this little square in the bottom right corner, and then drag all the way down. And the Excel spreadsheet, because you've used that formula, it magically works out all of the other formulas. So we need to go to 240, so we need to go up to there, and so I can just highlight these and press delete. Okay, so like I say, we could just have typed all of those numbers out individually one by one, and that would have been fine. But if it was a bigger spreadsheet, the smart way that I just demonstrated is definitely the best. Now your results will have to be typed one by one. So I will do this now. I now have the data from the handwritten results table, and I have entered it into Microsoft Excel. I'm now going to do a couple more things just to tidy up this table. So the first thing I can see is that I've got an inconsistent number of decimal places in the results. So I've got 1 decimal place there, 2 decimal places there, and no decimal places at the top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight all of my results, and I'm going to go up to where it says number, and you'll see that there's a little arrow in the bottom right. I'm going to click it. I'm then going to select number. I'm going to check that that is a 2 for 2 decimal places, and I'm going to click OK. And if you look at the results, they have now changed, they're consistent, and they all have 2 decimal places. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to highlight my titles, and I'm going to go up to this little paint box at the top, and I'm going to click the arrow. And I'm going to select the colour that I'd like. It's normally good to have a nice pale colour, and today I'm going to use pale grey, like that. I'm going to highlight my titles again, and I'm going to go to this B, which means bold. I'm going to click it. So now those titles are nice and clear. I'm going to highlight my columns. I'm going to double click the division between any 2 of the columns. And you could see the spreadsheet adjusting the widths so that they're all the right size. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this data and I'm going to make Excel plot a graph. So I'm going to highlight my data, and I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to go to Charts. Okay. So to start with, I'm going to select a scatter chart. Click that button. And I'm going to click this graph here. Okay, and this is initially what I have. Okay, so normally in chemistry, when you're dealing with results, this sort of scatter chart is what's required. You can see that it's automatically put in the correct scale. It's automatically detected that I have one column of independent variable data and 3 columns of dependent variable data. And it's plotted 3 scatter graphs. Okay, but there are a few things that I need to do to this graph. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click this button at the top left that says Quick Layout. And I'm just going to go through these. And you can see that when I hover my mouse over them, it shows the different types of graph that I can have. Okay, now some of these are quite useful. Some of them are inappropriate for what we want to do. Okay, so for example, I think this, this one is obviously inappropriate for what we want. So this type of graph is actually showing the coordinates of each point. Now we have so many points, as you can see, it just obscures the information. So I'm just going through, I'm hovering over these, I'm picking the one that looks the nicest, and I think it's this one here at the bottom left. I'm just going to click it. Okay, so you can see that it's automatically done a little key for me, so I can see that each different colour is automatically be done here. They haven't actually given us titles for these axes, but I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to select it, I'm going to double click it, and I'm going to change that to time in seconds. So the Excel spreadsheet automatically does a lot of the work for you, but there is normally 1 or 2 things that you need to do just to tidy it up. Okay, so once again, I've made sure that I've labelled my axes and I've made sure that I've got units on those labels. And you can see that Excel's very clever. It does the scale for you. It comes up with a nice sensible scale that shows the data really well. You've now got a couple of options. So you can either keep the graph as an element inside this spreadsheet, or if you right click the graph and go down to where it says Move Chart, you've got 2 options. So as I say, you can either have it as an object in this sheet, so just floating on top of the spreadsheet next to the table, or you can actually have it on its own sheet. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So I've selected that, I'm going to click OK. And magically, you can see it's created a brand new sheet with that data on it. Okay, so you can see if I go down here, I've got 2 tabs. So sheet 1 is where my original data was, and chart 1 is where I have my new graph. So a couple more things that you can do if you want. What you can do is you can highlight your data. Well, actually, if we highlight the graph first of all, and if I go to change chart type, okay, there are 1 or 2 things that I could do. So for example, you might want those points to be joined together. Okay, so if I just move that to one side, Okay, so you can see the little picture here. That's what it would look like if I joined the points together. Okay, so sometimes you might want that. Sometimes you might want to join the points together with nice straight lines. Okay, and again, you can see a preview of what that would look like. Sometimes you don't want the actual points at all, you just want a nice line. So that would look like that. Okay, and sometimes you want it like that. Okay, but I think in this situation, the most appropriate one would probably be something like that. So we want to be able to see the points, and we want to have a nice line drawn between them. There we are. One thing to watch out for is that all graphs don't necessarily start at the origin. So in this case, we did start from the origin. Okay, so we know that at 0 seconds, 0 mass had been lost. That's not always the case. So whenever you're doing an experiment, whenever you're drawing a graph, always just double check whether you have data at 0, 0. Okay, so sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It's a common mistake just to automatically put a point at 0, 0. In the video, you were asked to work out the initial rate of the reaction for all 3 of these situations. It's a little bit beyond GCSE chemistry, but the way you would do it is you would work out the gradient between the first 2 points on each of those 3 lines. Okay, so from maths, remember, the gradient is the change in y divided by the change in x. So it's sometimes described as rise over run. And in chemistry, we have a special name for that gradient. We call it the reaction rate. And if you take that reaction rate between 0 and the first point, it has another special name. It is called the initial reaction rate, or the initial rate of reaction. And in this situation, the units of reaction rate would be grams per second, or grams / seconds. Just to reiterate though, the calculation of reaction rates using graphs and the units are beyond the scope of GCSE chemistry.